Hello, everybody. My name is Elizabeth, the education coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. We have a fabulous presentation today with local book author, educator, researcher, nutritionist, and she has a plethora of amazing information to share with us today on food and mood. How can foods change your moods, and how can your moods change your food choices? So let's give a virtual round of applause to Dr. Deanna Minich.
Ah, thank
Yay!
you. Thank you so much. It's a delight to be here with all of you on a Saturday. And if you're in the Washington State area, then you know how warm it is. So everybody's indoors and hopefully keeping cool. So I would like to first get us going by having everybody write in the chat box how you're feeling right now. So go up to the chat. You'll see that little box where you can type something in, and I'd like to see where everybody's at with their mood. So maybe you want to type in just whatever emotional state. Be as honest as you can, whatever you're feeling right now. Okay, Tammy is overstimulated. Karen is hot and she's worried. She's worried about the next few days of heat. Janet is feeling rushed. Okay, Kathleen is saying low mood. Good, I'm so glad that everybody is being very authentic and really stating where they're at right now. Mary says eager for more information. Terrific. There's going to be a lot of information here. Fabulous. Anybody else want to chime in? Maybe one or two more? Elizabeth, how are you feeling?
I am feeling happy and excited.
Okay, happy and excited. Wow. Okay, Kathleen is medium mood. Gordy says low mood. Okay, I would say I'm feeling very balanced. Okay, Nicole says relaxed. I kind of feel the same. Something about the heat that just kind of relaxes me. So I'm feeling like I'm in the groove here with all of you. And what I hope to do here is give you lots of information about food and what food can do for your mood and how mood actually changes your food choices. So staying ahead of the curve and looking at how you feel is a big driver to your behavior. We as human beings, we move towards pleasure and we move away from pain. So sometimes food can be a source of comfort for us. So I'd like to talk about that. This is an educational presentation, so think of this as giving you information. And I'm not recommending anything here. I'm not going to be talking about any kinds of products. So, you know, there's that. But if you do feel like you need more support, and some of you might come back and say, how do I work with a nutritionist on my food and mood? You can go to the functionalmedicine.org website. You can check out Marlene's. They have so many different health educators who might be taking clients. I have struggled a lot with emotions and food. So I feel like perhaps I can share with you some of my own journey as to how I've dealt with that throughout my decades. I also want to say that I don't adhere to any specific dietary dogma. So I wanted you to know that I'm not purporting a certain diet to be followed by everybody. I think that nutrition needs to be personalized. With that said, I want to really bring forth the message that all of us have a story around food and eating. If all of you were here to do the presentation on your life, we would all have a story about food because all of us have to interface and we all have to eat with food. We interface with food and eating many times per day. If we go into the Marlene store, look at all of the choices that we have to make a selection about. And so for me, I grew up with a lot of restriction. My dad was a Chicago police officer. My mom was really into food and faith. She was kind of a health nut in the 1970s. And eating was serious business. We couldn't have sugar. We couldn't have white flour, white salt. There was a lot of conscientiousness. And I think a lot of that restriction took me into a more emotional sphere with food and eating. And really realizing later, how much I could use that restriction to balance into more fun, playfulness, and flow so that I wasn't as prone to cravings. Eating means so many different things to people. It is physical, it provides us with energy. So we sit there and we eat foods on the plate. It's giving us energy. We're engaging with our physical body when we eat. It's also very social. It's emotional. And in fact, I think it gets overlooked that over 75% of overeating is due to emotional reasons. And if we're not dealing with our emotions and our mood, that could be the underlying factor for why we make certain food choices. And not many people talk about this. We talk about emotions in the world of psychology. We talk about food in the world of nutrition, but there isn't a lot of overlap where people are talking about emotional eating and the role of food on stress and how we respond to stress. I also see food as being very spiritual. And the way I define spirituality is a sense of connection to something greater. When we eat, whether it's an apple or an avocado or spinach or anything that's growing, we really do connect into nature at a very deep level. If you see here in the middle, we have the physical aspects of food. And then around the physical, we also have the emotional. I want us to focus on the emotional here for a second, because food, as I mentioned, is very much layered with emotions. Many times we have memories about foods. We have a sense of pleasure that we derive from eating foods. And food, as I mentioned, can be very comforting. It may make us feel better to eat ice cream rather than to deal with a situation at hand. So I do think that this is a more complicated chart, but essentially what I want to convey here is that food has energy, not just physical energy, but emotional sensors or emotional energy. And I have really focused most of my nutritional career on plants, looking at the colors of plants and how there can be changes within our bodies and even our mood states by having certain colors. And I'm going to talk about those colors. So red, if we think of when we feel stressed, when we have a lot of adrenal exhaustion, a lot of reactivity, red colored foods, cranberries, strawberries, apples, these types of food contain things that would help us with the stress response. So you can see how the mind state is connected to the body state. With orange foods like persimmons and mangoes and mandarins and oranges, tangerines, these foods are rich in compounds called carotenoids, and carotenoids play a role in our reproductive health. So how creative we are. So if we're feeling stuck and we can't flow, I often say, are you getting your orange foods? Yellow is the color of happiness. People love yellow, anything. I mean, yellow is the color of the sun. It's bright, it's inspiring, it's radiant. Yellow foods, the unprocessed kind, like whether it's ginger or pineapple, lemon, bananas, plantains, all good for catalyzing our digestion. So we feel, when we feel good in the gut, it's like our whole being can be transformed and be radiant and confident. Green is the color of the heart. When you need some more expansion, when you need to feel less constrictive and bottled up, what I would say is get the expansiveness of greens. Things like leafy greens contain compounds that help your blood vessels to expand. And finally, the real brain color, the mood food color, is blue purple. And many people don't get enough blue purple. In fact, there was a survey, I think it was back in 2009, showing that 88% of Americans don't get enough of the color blue purple in their food. They get not a lot of the other colors either, but the one that they really fell short on was blue purple. Blue purple foods like blueberries, blackberries, boysenberries, grapes, even grape juice, even taking purple carrots instead of orange carrots, that beautiful, pretty compound that makes those foods purple seems to have a connection to the brain. those compounds go into the brain and are responsible for things like learning and memory and mood. So if you feel kind of cognitively not in alignment, you've got brain fog and you're not in a good mood, check your color blue, purple. Are you getting enough blueberries? Are you getting enough of these foods on a regular basis? Really important. So that's how I see colors as connected to the energy of mood and the energy of food. This is a very top line, but I'm going to take you through more of the science. And in addition to the science, I'm also creative. We're all creative. And the more that we can tap into our sense of creativity with food and get us out of our analytical mind, I think that we can be in greater balance, which is really the body and more of the artful mind aspects. So how do we light up those creative centers? We know that how we think becomes our body, right? The body-mind relationship is interconnected. So people can be eating really healthy food and doing a good job there, but if they're not focused on their thoughts and their thinking, then it's an incomplete equation. And conversely, if people are really very, I would say, empowering in their thoughts, but not attentive to their body, then again, it's imbalanced. So ideally, what we want is to eat foods that support our moods so that it makes it easier to be in that positive, optimistic type of mindset. And then when we are in that optimistic mindset, then our body is working better. We can deal with stress better. And I don't know about you, but on the heels of this pandemic, I kind of feel like so many people are depleted, stressed out, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, they're not sleeping well. We could all use a little bit of help, no matter what, no matter in what degree, right? So using food as a vehicle of helping our mood state is something that we would have a locus of control over. So how we eat is how we live, and how we live is how we eat. So you can say something about your life just by looking at the foods that you're eating throughout the day. So when I look down at my plate of food in the morning, I'm looking at what am I setting the template for the day. That is really going to change who I am, even not just through my body, but also through my emotions. But what we see happening on a more global scale is that people are eating very rushed. They're eating foods on the run. How they're living is translating into how they're eating. So they're living rushed lives. They're eating rushed foods. They're eating convenient foods, on-the-go foods, and they're eating those foods in a very stressed state. Now, all of you might be a little bit different where you say, well, that's not me. I shop at Marlene's. I am very conscientious about my food, but there might be times that you might not be as well equipped. You might be traveling, or there might be certain times of your life where you just have more stress overall. And I think that even those who make the best choices, we will still have stress in our lives. We are still going to have toxins in the environment that we have to combat. So surely there is a connection between nutrition and mental health. In fact, early on in nutrition as a science, we saw that there was a connection to psychiatry. So the nutrients that we were taking in was establishing the different building blocks of things like neurotransmitters and hormones. And even this publication in the Lancet, which is a medical journal, would show that there's a connection between healthy diets and a good mood and less healthy diets in a more depressed mood. There surely is a connection with depression and foods that we take in. This is a larger study looking at almost 9,000 people and showing that there was an association between taking in fast food, again, fast food, fast living, and the risk of depression. So there was a higher risk of depression with greater intakes of fast food. So the question is, how do we break that cycle, right? So many people in food deserts or just not making choices for non-fast food, and we can help them to feel better by breaking that cycle, even with one meal. Because truly, the foods we eat influence how we feel, and how we feel will determine the foods that we choose to eat. So here's my mantra. I say that when we eat colorfully, we live colorfully. I really do feel that when you start feeling good, you realize that you don't want to go back to feeling bad. And sometimes when you're feeling bad, you don't know how bad you feel until you start feeling good. So if you have one meal where you really get a jolt of energy, where you feel that vitality, you feel that energy, and it's not just physical energy, it's emotional energy. Your mind is clearer, you feel more emotionally sound, less reactive. We know that inflammation is connected to more reactive, impulsive behavior. We don't want to be reactive all the time. You know, that puts us in a stress state. So if you can just remember this principle, eat colorfully, live colorfully. And you could also say live colorfully, eat colorfully. They go in both directions. So remember the rainbow. When we say eat the rainbow has been out there for years and years and years, but there's so much science behind eating the rainbow. And it's not just because we want cancer prevention or we want to reduce the risk of chronic disease. What we now see from science is that eating more fruits and vegetables is associated with less psychological distress and better mood overall. And I have a lot of compassion for people who don't feel in a good mood because many times they don't realize that the foods that they're eating is changing their brain chemistry. And so helping others by just even having that one meal that's full of color, natural, whole, plant-based colors, might be able to get them onto a different path. Take a look at this graph. So what you see here is at the bottom, this is the number of fruits and vegetables. As that number goes up, what we see along the vertical axis is that life satisfaction goes up. So when you eat more fruits and veggies, and it doesn't matter how you eat, if you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, omnivore, it doesn't matter to me what dietary label you have for yourself. Just getting more plant foods is going to change your mood in a very favorable direction. Let's look at the Mediterranean diet for a second, because this is an example of one really colorful way to eat. It's the most well-studied diet on the planet. And look at the Mediterranean region, Spain and Italy and Greece, the way of life, how they eat, fresh foods. And when we take that diet and we bring it here in the United States, and what we see is that even without living in the Mediterranean, the greater that we adhere to such a fresh, plant-based dietary pattern, what we see is less incidence of depression. In functional medicine, depression is seen as brain on fire. When we have all that inflammation, it sets us up for more chronic disease. So depression to me can be an underlying signal that there is inflammation in the body, and we can help to undo or at least reduce some of that inflammation by eating foods that are more consistent with this type of dietary pattern. So well-being and happiness, I mean, who doesn't want to be happy, right? I think most people think, oh, I just want to be healthy. But why do people want to be healthy? They want to be healthy so that they can be happy and live a good quality of life. So you can see your family, your grandchildren, your children, you can be there and live a long life that's full of great vitality. That's what we want. And what we see in longer term and greater number of people studies is that well-being and happiness increase with consumption of fruits and veggies. So if you need another reason to eat fruits and vegetables, this is one that it might be helpful for helping you to live a better quality of life. This was a study in which they looked at over 400 adults and they tracked their food intake, they tracked their mood state, and what they found was that when people had eaten more fruits and veggies, they had greater well-being, greater curiosity, and even more creativity. And when you have more creativity, you're more in the flow. You can make better, more expansive choices. You see options and opportunities. Same thing here. This is another study. Eating fruits and vegetables helps with, or at least is associated with, greater emotional well-being. And the researchers in this study saw this effect when people were eating about 7 to 8 servings of fruits or vegetables per day. But I would say, start where you're at. Even if you can increase your fruits and vegetables like by 1 per day, you're still moving in that better direction. So this is a neat article. So this was done by a psychiatrist and a researcher, in which they looked at all of the different nutrients that you need to play a role in brain chemistry and are correlated with lesser depression. And so they looked at the foods that contain those nutrients, and what they found is that far and away that vegetables were up at that top of the list for being high on that antidepressant food score. And when you look at the animal foods, I don't want to leave animal foods out too for people who eat them. I embrace all ways of eating for all people. What you see here, if you look at the first column, these are animal foods. And then on the other side, you have plant foods. The higher the number, the greater the antidepressant food score. So it would contain more nutrients to help reduce the perhaps the incidence of depression. So you can see top list for animal foods: oyster, liver and organ meats, poultry giblets, if that entices anybody. On the plant food side, look at these numbers: watercress, 127%, spinach, mustard, turnip, or beet greens. All things green are so healing and potentially antidepressant in their activity because of the nutrients they contain. So what about stress and emotions and mood and food choices? It's been said that it's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction to stress. And for some of us, maybe it's flying in an airplane that causes stress. Maybe it's speaking in front of public. Maybe it is, going to the grocery store. During this time of the pandemic, there were a lot of new stressors that we had to come up against, right? And so it's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it. How do we change our reaction to stress? And I do think that we can help to modulate our response to stress by the foods that we are taking in. The first stage of stress is the alarm stage, where all of a sudden you can feel stress has come upon you. You can feel that fight or flight response. And then eventually, if we continue in that state, the body continues to release stress hormones. Blood pressure starts to creep up. Now we start to change our hormones like thyroid hormone, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone starts to change. And then eventually we get into the state where we are depleted. Now we get more prone to immune effects, infections, because we have been stressed for so long. Now we can't mount a response to stress. So how do we all manage stress? I want you to think about this for yourself for 1 second. When you're stressed, what happens? For some people, you might go to food. And typically that's not going over to broccoli. That's not going over to things that would be healthy, right? I know for me, when I'm stressed, one of my go-tos is things that are sweet. We all have a sweet tooth, and perhaps for good reason, because it ensures our survival, it ensures energy. But do we want that high sugar roller coaster? No, that's not going to be good for us long term. So I would say look at ways that we manage stress individually and see if you are stressed, and see if by changing your foods, you might actually be able to change your individual stress response. People who have more stress hormones, more cortisol, tend to, some people, when they're stressed, they eat more. Other people, when they get stressed, they don't eat. So on both sides of that coin, there can be not so good reactions there. In addition to stress eating, I would like to talk briefly about emotional eating, which is a big factor these days. Again, over 75% of overeating is thought to be due to emotions. So why are we not expressing our emotions? Why are we eating them down? And I don't know. I think for everybody, this is a little bit different. I would say we've become a more head-focused culture where we think it's weakness to show emotions. So we just don't do that. We might also be out of touch with our emotions, or we feel like it's not safe to express emotions. For women, many times anger feels very uncomfortable. For men, sometimes sadness feels comfortable, but we could across the board just feel uncomfortable with any emotion at any given time. So often emotional eating is where, instead of expressing an emotion, we choose to block or to bring that feeling down into the body with food. And what we see is that emotional eating doesn't lead to eating more sweet potatoes and kale and watercress. Emotional eating leads to eating more high energy dense foods that are low in nutrients. So things like ice cream, salty, crunchy foods, chips, soda, cakes, pastries. These are the types of foods that are usually the hallmarks of emotional eating. So that's why emotional eating is problematic, right? Because now we're taking in foods that aren't necessarily so great for us. You know, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I had, as I mentioned to you, I have an eating story that had brought in a lot of restriction and restraint. And what ended up happening for me is disordered eating. I ended up overeating and binging, especially on things that were high in sugar. And in the scientific literature, what you see is that there's a relationship. The more that we are restrained in our eating, the more that there can be mood issues like anxiety, which is why I don't talk about diets when I'm really focused on working with somebody. Rather than a diet, I would rather focus on making subtle, small changes in one's eating so that they feel better and then they continue on from there. Because even a small step in the direction of more of a colorful life can have a ripple effect. When we go on a diet, typically it means we go off of the diet. And what happens when we go off of the diet? Then we tend to go back to where we were before. So restraint in terms of eating, where we feel guilt because we eat something or we don't think we can have it, this can lead to mood disorders. So I'm going to give you some tools and some techniques so that you have more fun and enjoy the eating process a little bit more. For me, what I ended up doing was I went on to study nutrition and I got in my head. And then I realized I needed to undo a lot of that. And I needed to get back into my heart, back into my creative self as it related to emotions and flow and eating behaviors. I want you to be thinking about how you eat. It's not just what you eat. You can have this beautiful salad like she's eating right here, but stuff it down or eat it in the car on your way somewhere and kind of engage in dashboard dining. So, you know, that is a form of where we're not as mindful, right? And so chances are we won't feel as satisfied from that meal. And I'd like you to look at your food more symbolically. I'd like you to look at your plate of food when you're eating in the morning or at lunch, dinner, whenever you're eating. I want you to look at that plate of food and think about that plate of food or bowl or whatever it is that you're eating, and think of that as becoming you. That food will be integrated into your cells, your DNA, that you are going to start speaking the language of that food. It'll be transmitted and translated through your genes. So that's why I like this quote, a very ancient quote by Khalil Gibran. I saw them eating and I knew who they were. And many of us, if we can just move into a more focused setting with our food and not have the television in front of us, we can be in that state of being more present and more mindful. This was a study some time ago that showed that 91% of people typically watch television when they're eating. So what happens if your television program is 2 hours long? Does that mean that we're going to be eating for 2 hours and in a mindful type of fashion where we don't really feel that sense of satiation and satisfaction? Many times people are often too busy to sit down and eat. They're eating on the run. I see this a lot with working moms or other people juggling multiple tasks or functions throughout the day where they're eating, they're trying to make for their family. Teachers are sometimes like this too. 35% eat lunch at their desk while working. Think of how so many of us are on Zoom these days and how we might have our meal right next to our computer just for ease. And then a certain fraction of people are eating while driving. I call that dashboard driving, where we're eating while we're driving, but it's putting us out of a sense of mindfulness and being present with our food intake. When we have mindful eating, meaning that we're present, we're in the moment, we're aware of our body, we have potentially less risk of having different types of eating forms that would not be as beneficial, like binge eating. So you can see from this particular study, there was a decline in binge eating, as well as anxiety and depressive symptoms, just by doing mindfulness-based stress reduction. In fact, mindfulness meditation can help to decrease binge eating and emotional eating. So if you feel stressed out and you have to eat something, right? What you can do is just get into that mode of being more mindful, just closing your eyes, moving yourself away from the situation, giving yourself that 15-minute wait out so that you can collect yourself. And I think that with the pandemic, people have been eating more meals at home, although not everybody, but I would say that when we are able to eat home cooked meals more frequently, this has been shown to be connected to just even having better benefits. So looking at greater fruit and vegetable intake if we're eating at home. Also, I would mention to look at the servingware that you use. How big are your plates? I don't know about you, but I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in the Midwest, and I was told growing up.
She hung up. She hung up.
That's okay. You know how to.
Up. And I was told to eat everything on my plate. And I think that if we have it in our mind, emotionally, we may come to the meal thinking, oh, I need to eat everything on my plate. So check your bowls, your plates, your glasses, because so much about our environment can prime our mood response and our food choices. I think it's always fun to do that. And I think that having a good intention when we're eating, this is a really neat study where they had tea, and the tea that was treated with good intentions, it was a blessed tea, improved mood more than tea that wasn't blessed, essentially was the essence of this study, which really speaks to bringing an intention, one word before you eat to kind of settle your mood, bring you into a state of more presence. When you are more present and more attentive, then you may have the ability to not have distractions. You'll be more focused in that way. That's what this study looked at. This was a meta-analysis looking at many studies and finding that eating when distracted produced a moderate increase in immediate intake, but increased later intake to a greater extent. So if you eat when you're distracted, like eating in the car, we tend to eat more. And we probably tend to eat things that, again, are not the best, most mood promoting foods for us. I use guided imagery as well to de-stress the mind, because again, as I opened up this presentation with, the body-mind relationship is interconnected. So visualizing your health, visualizing your mood state can be really important for helping to de-stress the mind. This is why even a couple of minutes of silence before eating, again, reconfigures and resets your body-mind template. The relaxation response. So what we see is that being more relaxed, having this relaxation response can help to reduce stress-induced eating. And it does so in both the body ways, the physiology ways, as well as the mind ways, the psychological ways. So again, being more relaxed, and plus when we rest, we digest better. If we're stressed, we're not going to digest as well. So whatever your, I would say the way that you like mindfulness the most, some people like meditation, and with more meditation, we tend to see greater mood states, better favorable mood. Mindfulness practice leads to increases in brain gray matter density. What does that mean? That means that the more that you practice mindfulness, you actually keep your brain nice and plump, because what happens with aging is the brain starts to shrink. And when that happens, then we start to get cognitive issues. So being more mindful, less stressed, actually helps you better with an aging brain. And what about just taking nice deep breaths before we eat? Breathing in for 4, holding for 4, releasing for 4, and holding for 4. This is what I call the 4 square breath. And that's one way to get into that mode of relaxation. Remember that you always have your breathing available to you, and that can help to reset your nervous system so that you'll be less prone to engaging in emotional eating. This was a really neat study in which they looked at chewing. You know how you hear the phrase, oh, just chew your food really well? So these researchers wanted to know what's more effective for digesting carbohydrate. Is it being relaxed, or is it chewing your food really well? And what they found was that it was relaxation that was even more important than sufficient chewing. Not to say that you shouldn't chew your food, and having relaxation plus chewing was much better, but it's so important to relax because, again, if you can remember, rest and digest, this is the key to really helping you to receive food better. Being in nature can help us. And if you're in the Pacific Northwest like me, we've got a lot of this around. So if we feel like our mood state needs a little bit more cooling off, finding ourselves in a forest, doing some forest bathing, breathing in those beautiful plant compounds, those phytoncides. And then as far as some other techniques, I think first, many people have to figure out if they're emotionally eating. Many people don't actually know that. They might be doing it, but not aware that they're doing what's called emotional eating. So again, emotional eating is where instead of expressing emotions, we're repressing them. We might be overeating. We might be eating foods loaded with sugar and fat. We might be drinking more alcohol, always keeping busy, working too much, indulging in television too much, just keeping things more superficial. So how does this translate into the body when we are not expressing our emotions? And if you think of the word emotion, it's energy, in motion. Emotions need to move through us. We're just coming off the tails of a full moon. And so I think about all of the emotions that are coming up for people, right? It's warm weather, full moon, lots of things that are potentially moving through us. And if we're not letting those things move through, we might have fatigue, and we don't know why we have fatigue. We might be depressed. And what's really interesting is that traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, acknowledge that there is a connection between emotions and physical health. And so looking at those things for yourself, because in general, I don't think our society cultivates emotional expression in good, healthy ways. Many times we say, well, just get through it, ignore it, carry on, keep busy, time heals all wounds, stop crying. We have all kinds of connotations. There can be healthy ways to express emotions, however, as adults. And this would be my 3-step process. The first step is to become aware, and I'm going to take you through each one. First, become aware of how your body is reacting. Are you overly fatigued? Are you depressed? How are you eating? What are you eating? Number 2, develop alternatives. I'm going to go through some of those. And then number 3, look deeper into what you could be doing. Now, one of the first things to do is you take a piece of paper and you fold it in 2. And on one side of the paper, you write down all of the things that give you energy. And then on the other, you time yourself for about 3 minutes, just very quickly. What are all the things that give you energy? And you can do this on your own time. On the other side, you write down all the things that take away energy from you. Because if we don't do the inventory of what takes our energy, then we might continue to engage in things that are zapping us of emotional energy and causing us to feel more depleted. Emotional hunger. So how do we become aware? So we can do that inventory exercise. You may also want to look at your hunger habits. Are you, typically emotional hunger is quick. It's for very specific foods. Like you might even go out of your way to go shopping for those foods. It's not in the body, it's in the mind. It's kind of in the thought sphere, so to speak. It usually occurs with some type of emotion. Have you ever had maybe a fight with somebody or a distressing conversation, and then all of a sudden, in order to deal with that, you just go and eat something rather than to really process it, reflect it, let it out in some way, in a healthy way. Emotional hunger is also very difficult to stop. This is why we can sit in front of the television and continue to eat. It goes hand to mouth, hand to mouth, hand to mouth, right? And it can lead, here's, I would say, the most challenging piece of emotional hunger is that it can lead to guilt. It can lead to more emotions that then don't get processed. So then it revs the cycle even more to lead to more emotional eating. So what is physical hunger? How can we connect to our bodies? Typically, physical hunger is not so urgent. It's slower. We can let our appetite build. It's not like we have to have a food right now. And it's more in the body, it's more in the digestive tract. We feel it, we can feel the grumble in the stomach. And it doesn't occur out of emotions typically. And there isn't guilt that results as a result of eating from physical hunger. All right, so that's developing awareness. Now we transition to number 2. What can you do instead of emotionally eating? I mentioned previously waiting for 15 minutes. If you can move yourself out of a situation for 15 minutes, this is known as the 15-minute wait out, where you can reset your neurochemistry, where you come back into the situation and realize, okay, now I can make a better choice. And let's just say I love chocolate. So my go-to, even emotionally, is usually chocolate. And I have found a way where I can have guilt-free chocolate in the way of, don't have the chocolate that has the sugar. I don't have the chocolate that has the dairy. I have the organic, fair trade, darkest, highest percentage of cocoa imaginable. And then I feel good about it. It's like, okay, I can let myself have chocolate. I don't have to create more guilt. I just make a better food choice within the food that I want to already have. And then other alternatives that require, this is a little bit less food-based and more, I would say, mental emotional based. Writing down your emotions, treating them as messengers, really honoring them, talking it out with a therapist or friends or family you trust. Exercising. You know, sometimes when I feel very emotional about something, I just kind of let it sit and then I go for a walk. When I move my body, it's like or even if I take a hot shower, I know right now on a hot day, that doesn't sound very pleasing, but have you ever been in the shower and you just feel more relaxed? And then you can just express, I don't know, and sometimes paying attention to our dreams. What are our dreams saying? Maybe we need more sleep to process things in a different way. Music can also help to harmonize the brain hemispheres. So be specific as to what you are feeling. If you start to journal your emotions, look at the little and important hurts, things that may have happened to you, but many times we say, oh, I'm a good person. I shouldn't let that conversation bother me. But it does. So if we don't acknowledge it, it kind of stays with us, right? So write it out, talk it out, get it out through movement. Keep a journal. I also have on here a heart rate variability biofeedback device to help you to know when you're in a more stressed state. And one of the ones I like is Heart Math. So they're really wonderful in that way. You can also, I'm offering up to all of you, if you would like a way, and you're a journaler, you like to track things, I put together this food and mood tracker. So what it is if you look at the form, you can see it's all the days of the week. Then I have the colors of food. This is where you track your colors of food. So if you have an apple, you put 1 mark for the red box. You have an orange or carrot, you put it in the orange box. And so you track your colors of healthful plant-based foods. And then you also track the colors of your moods throughout the day. So red mood would be angry or frustrated. Orange is playful. Yellow is happy. Green is loving and grateful. Blue purple would be sad, depressed. Brown would be worried or anxious. And white, open-minded and hopeful. So I just created some symbols for those colors. You can change that up if you want. But once you start to do this, you're going to see that there's a connection, like, oh, I didn't get any of these beautiful colors of foods today. And look at how worried and anxious I felt. No blue purple. I felt sad and depressed. And some of these effects can come up fairly quickly for some people. Here's how you find that form. If you go to my website, deannaminich.com, you go to that resources tab and you see at the bottom where it says downloads, a bunch of free downloads. And if you scroll through the list, you'll see the food and mood tracker. And that will give you this form where you can fill it out like that. And it will just give you kind of an explanation of how to use it. What about feeling emotions in the body, right? I want to do an exercise with all of you in our remaining minutes, and then I want to open this up for questions. So start populating the chat with your questions if you'd like. We will have time to do that. I want to do a quick activity with all of you. I want you to get a sense of feeling your emotions in your body. You know, our bodies are such a great vehicle, such a great vessel. And oftentimes when we feel something emotionally, some part of our body is responding. And for some of us, it's the same body part over and over again. I know for me, when I was growing up, it was always my skin. When I was mad, my skin would become red. Or when I was, my skin in general, it just always showed me something. For some other people, sometimes their back goes out. They get pain somewhere. They might feel something, they're not expressing it. And somewhere they feel a body connection. So here's what I want us to do in this. It's very quick. So let's look at the right side here, the words that are in red. These are not very comfortable emotions, right? Things like jealousy, rage, anger, grief, embarrassment, guilty, pride, despair, fear, neutrality. I just put neutrality in there, just that's not necessarily uncomfortable. So I want you to pick one of those and maybe pick one that's challenging for you. And close your eyes and reflect on that emotion if you can. And even better, if you can go to a time when you felt that emotion and just very quickly see where in your body you get a response. Whether your attention is automatically taken to that part of the body, or you get a twitch, or you feel something, you feel heat. That can also be a sign of activity. Okay, so there's that. Open your eyes. So just very quick, right? That, you know, emotions we don't have to belabor and think through emotions. They just work fast. And for some people, they might have difficulty feeling where their emotions are in their body, and that's okay. And I want to hear from some of you when we go to the questions. Now let's shift over to the green words. Pick an emotion from here and do the same thing. So just for a second, I'm going to choose one, too. I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to close my eyes and reflect on that word and just kind of see where I feel it. All right, and then to open your eyes. So I'll just give you an example what happened for me in that case. So I chose satisfied. The moment I closed my eyes and I reflected on feeling satisfied, I just felt it in my heart. I just felt like this expansion in my heart, like almost like I changed my posture a little bit when I was in that mode of satisfied, right? I just felt content. I could lay back. So reflect on that, exercise that emotional muscle, because so many of us have been taught to not connect to our emotions and to bury them with things like food. And so we get that food mood connection to be very distorted, whereas our emotions are such incredible information about where we're at in that moment. Then there's also another technique. It's called laddering, and this is pretty fun. And if we want to do this and we don't have enough questions, I can surely do this technique. So this is fun. Like, let's just say that you've got what doesn't everybody write down on the chat a food that you crave a lot and you don't know why you crave it. It's just like you keep coming back. It's like, oh, I need this food. I need this food. Maybe it's coffee, maybe it's cheese, maybe it's potato chips, maybe it's peanut butter. I've had people say bread, I've had people say pasta, but just chat it in. Just if you want, just, you know, we all have our favorite foods. You know, for me, I mentioned already, it's chocolate. So when we do that, once you chat that in, we're seeing some writing on the screen. That's interesting. Okay, so that word. So if we were to, let me just look at what some of you are writing in. Let me just take one of these examples. Okay, Janet is saying bread. That's a common one. My dad really likes bread too. And bread is one, it's kind of comforting, it's cushy, it tastes good, you know, it kind of leaves you with that homemade kind of feel. So bread. So Janet, if I were to work with you on understanding and unearthing your emotional connection to bread, I would have you close your eyes and I would say to you bread 20 times pretty quickly. And then you would say back to me, after every time I would say bread, you would say the first thing that came to you. Maybe it's white bread, brown bread, grains, you know, you kind of go through what the bread looks like, because usually that's what happens with people. But then as we go deeper into the subconscious, what tends to happen is that many times there's a memory connection to the bread. There's the connection that maybe you reflect back to when you were a child and had bread in certain situations. So many times we're eating our memories. We are subconsciously connecting into memories as we select certain foods, and we don't have a conscious recognition of that. So that's going to change our mood food connection there. All right, in summary, I'm just going to, and you have your own summary, what you're taking away. I want to hear more from you, what you took away from this presentation. So why don't you chat in if you can. I'd like to hear what would be your takeaway from listening to this presentation on food and mood. What did you learn? What did you relearn? What is something that you can put into action fairly quickly? And I'm going to look at the chat just to see what everybody is writing in. I'm curious to see if there's something of value, some information, something that you got inspired to do or to be thinking about. And then I'm just transition to my last slide here while everybody is doing that. Anything you want to share? I see some of you typing in. And Elizabeth, oh, Elizabeth, you said chips is your food. Okay, Karen is saying that she likes the food and mood tracker. She's going to try that for a couple of weeks and see what she learns. Fabulous. You know, even if you did it for a week, you could learn a lot about the colors that you're taking in and the moods that you're feeling. So Elizabeth, what did you learn? You said blue purple is the least consumed food and it's super important for brain food. Yeah, when you think blue purple, the B for blue is B for brain. So when you, and especially now, you know, blueberry season, stock up on those beautiful blues, but rotate. Don't always have blueberries. Realize that, especially in the Pacific Northwest, we have blackberries. Blackberries are phenomenal for the brain. Kathleen, you are saying, like the food tracker and the food that relate to the different parts of the body. Okay, wonderful. Karen, you are asking, let's move into some questions now. So feel free to type them in as you'd like. You're saying, Karen, if you never eat blue purple foods, does that mean you tend to be depressed all the time? Not necessarily. You know, depression is connected to so many different things, and it's difficult to say that just not having the blue purple foods could lead for everybody to depression. For example, depression might be because we have inflammation from certain conditions. It might mean that we're not sleeping well, and so therefore we've got a little bit more inflammation in the body, or that we have, you know, just different things can be going on in the body. But what I can tell you is that there is literature to suggest that eating blue purple foods may help and may be associated with less association or less propensity or less risk for being depressed. It may help with healthy mood. So I don't know if it's causal. It may not be the cause, but it may actually help. So Tammy is saying, I love the colors aspect. Oh, wait, it just scrolled up. Tammy says, I love the colors aspect as it works with the chakra colors. And so it connects the physical place in the brain and the body. That's super helpful. So I can look at emotions and physical location together and then give it food medicine as per color needed. Absolutely. In fact, my first book was called Chakra Foods, where I looked at and in fact, that the whole detox book is essentially looking at these different color coded systems in the body and looking at the color connection of food. All right, great, Tammy. She says, I'll look it up. Thanks. Karen is saying thanks. Anything else that I can help with, everybody, before we come to our final minutes of closing?
Yeah, well, we have the wonderful expert here on keeping your life colorful and your food plate.
So it looks like thank you so much, Elizabeth. Tammy has a question. So Tammy, can you chat it in? And thank you, Kathleen, for being here. She's got to sign off now. So thank you. And keep in mind, everybody, that you can listen to this presentation on the Marlene's Market and Deli page. So the Tacoma location page. So feel free to chat in any final questions before we say goodbye. And if there isn't anything, that's okay too. There's a lot of information here. So, and that's why I say, even if there's just one simple thing, I would say just go with that rather than try to absorb it all. So Janet, you're asking, so how can you find somebody who works with food and mood? I'm going to chat in here 2 different websites. So if you go to my website, foodandspirit.com, you'll see a directory of practitioners, and many of them are equipped to work with food and mood. So there's that. There's also the Institute for Functional Medicine. So I'm going to type in here functionalmedicine.org. This is another site where you can put in your zip code and look for practitioners. Some of them may not have nutrition expertise, so you have to read through that a little bit more. Tammy is saying, my mother and brother refuse to look at nutritional health information despite their health, which obviously triggers emotions for me. How can I approach it differently with them? You know, so I completely understand this. You know, I talked about my mom being a health nut, but my dad's a junk food guy. And what's very interesting to me is that oftentimes family members just, we don't look to other family members for advice for various reasons. And all we can do is the best we can. And I've heard that over and over again from other people where maybe the mother, the grandmother wants their grandchildren or children to do better in health, but you know, oftentimes they need to hear it from somebody else, or maybe they just aren't going to make that change. And I know that we feel a sense of like, wow, we want to share that information with them. We want them to feel good. All I can tell you is what has worked for me. And I would say to be that living example, follow your path, follow your truth, be around people who support you in that approach to food so that you do feel a sense of heightened emotion and that you feel good about the path that you have chosen. But I think in terms of trying to change other people, it's very difficult. I think all you can do is follow your path. That is what I have found for myself. Karen is asking, can you tell me a little about the book Whole Detox? Yeah, I can. So the book is, it's all about colors and the colors of food. There's a questionnaire inside. It's a very hands-on guide. There's a 21-day program in it with recipes, and there are vegan recipes and omnivore recipes. So you can select whichever track you want to be on, or maybe you want to mix and match. But everything is color coded. For 3 days, you get into red foods. The next 3 days, you get into orange foods. And this is working on the body-mind system that we actually have been talking about, and really gets into that color code of foods that I started us with. Erica, you are saying here, eating colored foods for different moods is very fascinating and will help me to change my way to look at food. I didn't realize how high the percentage for emotional eating was. Yeah, it's been estimated. I'm not sure where that number had been generated from, but oftentimes we see that. And I bet if we think of ourselves, how often are we stressed and how does that change our eating? It's a large percentage of the time. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to, the more that we become aware, we cannot become unaware. Once you have seen something and realized something, you can't really unsee it. So I do think that for all of you that have been here for this presentation, this is going to change your food and eating behaviors and selections going forward. You will be thinking about these things. You will be thinking about the colors of food. So Tammy, you're asking, is there a copy of this talk that will be available? There will be yes, Elizabeth just responded to that. So this will be available on the Marlene's Tacoma Facebook page. I'm also going to share it to my Facebook page, Deanna Minich PhD. So I'm going to put it on there too, so everybody can see it. I want to thank Elizabeth. I want to thank Marlene's. I was just at Marlene's this past week. I shop there all the time. The Tacoma location, it's closer for me. Really love what Marlene's brings forth in terms of education and good, wholesome food. I love the soups in the deli, by the way.
They are delicious.
They are. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to Elizabeth for organizing this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Minich. I'm just super happy you could be here with us this afternoon. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Stay hydrated, stay cool. And I am just so happy to be a part of this community, helping those who are wanting this wonderful information, such as yourself, that you've shared with us today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Stay in touch.